Thank you so much, Shauna, and hello, everybody. It is such a treat to join all the rabble-rousers and innovators and change makers that VERGE always draws. This might be the 10th year for this conference, but really from my vantage point, there has never been a better time to be working in climate tech. That's because going forward, thanks to the President's leadership, the full force of the federal government is going to be squarely behind climate action and clean energy deployment. This administration took office aiming to put the country on track to cut carbon pollution in half by the end of this decade and make our electricity sector 100% clean by 2035, and then reach net zero by 2050. It took some time and more than a few trials and tribulations, but we now have the legislation to make it happen. Of course, it starts with the bipartisan infrastructure law, this body of laws that define the president's climate agenda, and the bipartisan infrastructure law is the backbone. And that makes an historic investment to build greater resilience into our physical infrastructure, including the power grid, and to lay down new supply chains, and to develop and demonstrate next generation technologies with enormous potential to revitalize economies and create good-paying jobs. I'm talking clean hydrogen and carbon capture and enhanced geothermal, advanced nuclear, next-generation batteries, utility-scale storage, and more. And then the CHIPS and Science Act, the BRAIN, which invests in cutting-edge science and innovation, and it boosts American manufacturing of semiconductors, which is, of course, a key ingredient in clean energy technologies. And then last, but certainly not least, the third piece of legislation is the Inflation Reduction Act, which we call the lungs, breathing life into the country's clean energy industries by incentivizing businesses to put real skin in the game with American parts and American labor. So all told, these three pieces, this agenda, is going to marshal roughly $500 billion for clean energy deployment and climate action. And that doesn't even count the funding that's going to flow in from a private sector that sees real certainty now in these spaces. This agenda makes massive investments in place-based solutions, recognizing that no one community is the same, that all these communities have unique resources and advantages that they can use then to carve out new opportunities in the clean energy economy. And it makes massive investments in equity and environmental justice, with tens of billions of dollars covered under the Justice 40 initiative, which directs 40% of the benefits from the federal clean energy and climate action into disadvantaged communities, whether those communities are on the front lines of climate change or on the fence lines of fossil fuel facilities or at the edge of the transition after helping to power our nation for the past 100 years. The president's agenda gives us a real shot at making America the world leader in a global clean energy market that's projected to reach $23 trillion at a minimum by the end of this decade. And it gives us a shot at using the spoils of that market to revitalize local economies. And of course, it puts our climate goals within reach. Of course, to make the most of all these opportunities, we have to put millions of Americans to work, and good-paying, high-quality jobs that offer a chance to join a union and a pathway to the middle class. We need contractors installing heat pumps. We need electricians that are setting up rooftop solar. We need engineers planning new wind farms. We need manufacturing workers on assembly lines and new plants. We need mine workers and smelters building up our supply chains. We need line workers beefing up the grid, and on and on and on. And yes, I mean we, you, me, everyone gathered together at VERGE, because as stunning as these three legislative accomplishments are, bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, right now, they're just lines of text. And we need your help to translate those lines of text into transmission lines, into dollars out the door and shovels in the ground, because so much of the funding in these bills is in the form of either competitive grants or tax incentives for new projects or rebates for consumer purchases. So to the businesses that are out there, Send us proposals for big, bold, clean energy projects, proposals with maximum potential to create good-paying jobs and deliver environmental justice and make an impact in the fight against climate change. In fact, for the first time ever, we're evaluating applications for whether and how they generate meaningful, measurable benefits for workers and the communities that they live in. So to the investors, get investing so we can accelerate this transition as quickly as possible. To the innovators, work with us to drive these next generation technologies like clean hydrogen and advanced nuclear and geothermal and CCUS and more. And to the policymakers and the civil servants, help us get the word out that the federal government is handing out money for energy efficiency upgrades. Every one of you has a role to play here. And there is just no time to waste and no limit to the opportunity ahead. I mean, if you think back 10 years ago to that first year for this VERGE conference, think about what the world looked like then, what federal action on climate and clean energy looked like then, where the international community stood at that point. I don't know, would you have guessed that today in the US, utility-scale solar would be a third cheaper than natural gas, that onshore wind would be almost half the cost, that EV sales would be skyrocketing, and that around the world 40 million people would be working in clean energy? Would you have thought it? The pace of the progress to date has really been breathtaking. And yet, with President Biden's agenda, we are truly just getting started. So imagine what the world might look 10 years on from today at VERGE 32. Better yet, instead of imagining, let's get busy building that world together. Back to you, Shauna.